Hello and welcome to the channel. I will introduce myself and today's guest after a couple of preliminary comments. The situation in Israel and Gaza today is obviously very tragic and complicated. We can't pretend to understand or bring light to the situation in a brief conversation. Consider, for example, the claim of today's guest, a Jewish rabbi, that there would have been no massacre by Hamas on October 7th if the Israeli Zionist movement did not exist. What the rabbi does not take up, at least not in this short exchange, is what the proper response should have been to the Jews being consistently and systematically robbed and killed in Europe and throughout the world prior to the Zionist movement. That, of course, is a much more complicated question, and one that I think goes to the heart of the human predicament. That predicament, fittingly enough, is captured in the Old Testament story of Cain and Abel, where Cain kills his brother Abel out of resentment for his success. Instead of going down the rabbit hole of deciding who, metaphorically, is Cain and who is his brother Abel in the history of people, which would be a never-ending rabbit hole, what I've tried to do in this exchange, and what I've tried to invite our guest to do, is to move away from religious language toward the language of science. It seems to me that humans are more likely to understand each other and perhaps agree if we move toward science and away from religion. This is not a condemnation of religion, but rather an invitation for religious people to move away from dogma, to speak clearly and scientifically rather than metaphorically. After all, if we're going to move away from a planet filled with nuclear weapons toward any version of the paradise promised by almost all religions, we had better start getting a little more precise about how. That is the gazillion euro question. How, as a species, are we going to get to the promised land? Or to speak more neutrally, how are we going to stop from destroying ourselves? I will let you judge for yourself whether today's conversation with Rabbi Weiss moves us in the right scientific direction or not. As always, thank you for listening, and if you're an expert in any relevant discipline, or if you think your religion or ideology is the right one and would like to talk scientifically about why, please let me know. I'd love to have you on as a guest. Hello and welcome to A Theory of Everything. I'm Luis Razo, the director of the European Institute of Science and Management, where our mission is to use scientific principles to address the world's most pressing management challenges. And chief among these challenges is the phenomenon of war. Today, we're going to break from the norm a little and talk to Rabbi Dovid Weiss, a prominent religious figure and a spokesman for Neturei Karta. Is it you?
The Jews United Against Zionism.
Jews United Against Zionism. Thank you, Rabbi. Rabbi Weiss is a somewhat controversial person, or perhaps a very controversial person, known paradoxically enough for his dedication to advocating for peace and his unique perspective on the Israel-Hamas conflict. For many years, he's been actively involved in peace-building efforts between Jews and Muslims, and he's here today to share his thoughts about the tragic situation in Israel and Palestine. Rabbi Weiss, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. It's an honor, a privilege, and I pray to the Almighty that He should bestow upon me His truth and wisdom, that I may be worthy of conveying His message, and so bring peace to the world, inshallah, and to sanctify His name.
Well, thank you very much. Well, I'd like to start in a slightly unconventional way by making 2 points. First is a confession that I have a deep admiration for the Jewish people, at least partly because of the absolutely disproportionate impact that the Jews have had on Western civilization and on the planet as a whole, and on, in addition, virtually every branch of science. So I'd like to make that clear from the beginning to listeners and as well to you, Rabbi. The second point I'd like to make is that, unfortunately, whenever we talk about religion, which is going to be one of the subjects today, one major obstacle, at least from my humble perspective, is language, which is why at ASIM we always try to steer the conversation towards science, where language is less of a problem. It's not, language is still a problem in science, but it's not as perhaps not as serious as it is in religion or philosophy or theology. So the first question, Rabbi, where does science fit into your worldview?
Well, with the help of the Almighty, Judaism is the meaning to be subservient to the Almighty, to accept that He rules the world. The Almighty, it's His world. He created the world, and we are simply, our religion is to be accepting this covenant that we made on Mount Sinai 3,000 years ago of following the laws that He gave to us, the Torah. To us, every part of the world, whether it's astronomy, astrology, any type of science or whatever it may be, it's just part of this world, the fabric of the world, and it's God's creation, every part of it. So to try to separate the concept of science from religion, from godliness, is just ridiculous, because the whole world is living and breathing with all the billions of DNA and a person, his life, his body is ticking and so forth. This is because God, we believe, is giving life every second and is there controlling the world every second. So science is just part, of course, one branch or so, to say, of this fabric of the world that God is ruling and every moment. And when you started the introduction, and thank you very much for your respect and so forth for the Jewish people. Well, we understand that the Jewish people, as required by God, are supposed to and do charity constantly, and try to help every human being, every person. That it's our requirement to do that, and science, of course, is part of that. But, and that's a big but, the state of Israel, Zionism, that is trying to masquerade, to put on a facade that they are this Judaism, that is what we are opposed to, and that we, as not me personally, it's not you've introduced me as like a personality. I'm simply voicing the voice of the pure Torah that we are, our covenant that we adhere to throughout the world. Invariably, all the large Jewish communities that are truly religious share the view that I simply espouse, that I'm trying to explain to the world. It's not my view. This is what Judaism is. Zionism is a transformation into nationalism, into having a piece of land void of God in its essence. In other words, they tell you that they proudly announce that you can be that they are a democratic society, a democratic state, and they can say that you can openly desecrate the Sabbath, which from the 10 Commandments. We say God created the world 6 days, and the seventh day He rested, and we made a covenant with God as Jews that we are not to do work on the Sabbath. We're not allowed to ride, to go in cars, or whatever it may be, all the things that entail that's considered work. And they openly run their country and declare that they're a democracy and everything is okay. So that is clearly how it's hypocritical, and that it's disingenuous and it's false. Their representation, they represent themselves as being the state of Israel. Israel is the name of Jacob in the Torah. They use the Star of David. They call it a Jewish state. So that is where we are opposed to, not to the Judaism or the Jewish people that you respect. That's, of course, we are one and the same of Judaism, but we are not to be affiliated or to be equated or to be considered as one with Zionism and the state of Israel, which is not 3,000 years. It was created, it's mere 100 odd years and 75 years up to the state. It's a transformation to nationalism, to an ersatz Judaism, a claim of they are something, a facade of Judaism, when they are really a nationalist movement to have a piece of land that was created by taking the land from another people, all which is unacceptable according to the Torah, and another, just one small issue, it's unacceptable according to the Torah for Jews, since the destruction of the temple 2,000 years ago, for Jews to have a kingdom or a national home or sovereignty at any place on the world, and even 1 centimeter, 1 inch, it's forbidden for us. So even if it would not affect the Palestinian people, all our rabbis who are true to the Torah would oppose it, and they did. Prior to the occupation in 1948, Zionism was already growing, was in Europe for 50 years or so, and they, in the 1930s, 1920s, 10s, and even the end of the 1890s, and they stood there, the rabbis, and they ostracized these people. We have books and publications. The rabbis speak out 130 years of opposition to Zionism, where we show the leading rabbis. This is only the statements of the leading rabbis from all the world Jewish communities that stated this is not Judaism. We are forbidden to create a state. We are forbidden, when it came to that they created the state in Palestine, we are forbidden to oppress, to kill, to steal. And on the contrary, we have to show gratitude to the Muslim people for being friendly to the Jews. So what Zionism is not the Judaism that you are happy to say that it's part of science and so forth. That's not what Judaism is. That is what we are opposed to, the Zionism, the state of Israel. And again, I thank you for being friendly to the Jewish people, even though unfortunately, Judaism is getting a bad rap, and they're doing things that give us a very bad name in the world now. So that's my unfortunately not brief answer.
No, that's fine. Thank you. We're here to listen to your perspective. Would you be nice enough to give listeners an overview of your organization and then the situation in Palestine at the moment with the war that's taking place?
Yes. Again, with God's help, our organization is called Neturei Karta. It's Aramaic. It's taken out of the Talmud, the Jewish teaching. It means protect. Neturei, protectors, Karta, of the city. It's just a name given to the ones of our Jewish communities, the very religious Jewish communities, who are very vociferous. They voice loudly and do actions, go out and demonstrate. People who are speak out against the establishment of the state of Israel and the actions that emanate from the state of Israel, all the terrible, terrible, tragic things that are done to the Palestinian people for this well over 75 years. So that is Neturei Karta. We try to protect protectors of the city, protectors of Jerusalem, so to say, the city meaning Jerusalem. Now, when Zionism came, they came from Europe. It was started in Austria. In Vienna was Theodor Herzl and so forth. And these people as a whole, the movement, as I said, is a nationalist movement. They were people almost entirely non-religious, and they wanted to create a nationalist home like any other country has. There's Italy, Spain, United States, Canada. They wanted to create a country with all the trappings of a country: Nobel Prize winners, Olympic team, gold-winning Olympic team, an army, and everything that belongs to a country. This is this new type of Judaism. The rabbis said right away from day one that we as Jews have a covenant with God. Judaism is not to create a state. It's to be subservient to God. Yes, we were commanded by God when he took us out of Egypt over 3,000 years ago to go into the Holy Land. But he, at that time, brought us in to serve him as a whole nation of holiness, not of democracy, to serve God. It's a religion. It's not a political state. And he actually, in the Torah, he stipulated that we have to be on a very high level of holiness. If not, then we will be driven from the land. And all the prophets, Ezekiel, Isaiah, Jeremiah, all of them speak and warn the Jews. Anybody who looks into the Jewish teachings and the books of the prophets, they kept on warning the Jews that we're not on that level of holiness, and therefore the land who rejects us as a body, as a scientist understands that a body is sensitive and rejects a foreign object. If you try to put in a heart, a kidney, the body without medication will not accept it. It will reject. It's sensitive. The Holy Land is sensitive, and we will be driven from the land if we're not on that high level of holiness. And that came about 2,000 years ago with the destruction of the temples that King Solomon built and so forth. Then King Solomon, when he built the temple, he actually wrote a book of prophecy called Shir Hashir, Song of Songs, where he warned the Jewish people, as the other prophets did. He wrote there, he said, when you are driven, if it will happen, driven into exile, do not try to awaken God's love prematurely. In other words, do not try to leave exile. It's a godly decreed exile. We weren't dispersed amongst the nations or driven into exile because we were lacking machine guns, Uzis, iron dome. It was because we were not on that level of holiness. So God caused the attack of Romans, of Greeks, whoever attacked the Jews and drove us into exile. We do not condone the violence that was done to the Jewish people. The Romans were punished by God, or the Egyptians who took the Jews into slavery for over 200 years were punished by God. But it all was the will of the Almighty. So 2,000 years ago, we were driven into exile, and it's because of our sins. We say, every Jew who says his prayers says, because of our sins, we were driven from the land. We are in exile. And we know that ultimately, God, with his compassion, one day will end exile, where all humanity will recognize one God and serve him in harmony. So we will not be standing with a gun over Palestinians. It will be the will of all humanity, where God will build the third temple, we believe. It won't be done through human intervention. God will build. So it will be a metaphysical change in the world. That is what we yearn and hope for. But till that day comes, we are expressly forbidden to recreate any Jewish kingdom, sovereignty, national home. So our rabbis told the Zionists, you people are not obeying the laws of the Torah. You're ignoring, just like most of them didn't eat kosher, didn't keep the Sabbath, didn't keep the 10 Commandments, and so on. They said, you want something because for your convenience sake, you want to create a state. This is not Judaism. Don't say it's Judaism. Don't call it a Jewish state. Don't call it the state of Israel. And so they stood in opposition, and these around the world, they were ostracized, these Zionists. Later, unfortunately, throughout the history, what happened with the Holocaust and Jews were murdered and so forth, and Britain gave the Zionists power, and they eventually, the United Nations ratified the state of Israel, and they became the de facto power in Palestine. The rabbis still stood in opposition. So you had the Muslims community who obviously didn't want to be ruled by the state of Israel. You had the Christian community didn't want, but even the Orthodox community that was living there for hundreds of years in peace and harmony with the Arab and Muslim populace, they were living hundreds of years as they were living in Iraq and Iran, in Egypt and so forth. We flourished in all these countries. These communities lived there, and we had a rabbinate and a chief rabbi. The rabbis, like when Zionists started coming up in first we lived together in peace, and then when they started coming up, the Zionists, to create their state, the chief rabbi was Rabbi Sonnenfeld of blessed memory, met with the king of Transjordan, and he sent letters to the Arab Congress, and we have their writings, and it's in Arabic. He's put in Hebrew and in English, and they pleaded with them, telling them, you should know we do not support the Zionist movement. When he passed on, Rabbi Sonnenfeld, Rabbi Dushinsky became chief rabbi of again, nothing to do with the Israeli rabbinate or the chief rabbis. This is part of the masquerade of their farce. We have a Jewish community called Erat Judaism, this God-fearing community that was living and is living till today in the Holy Land. They were the community of Jews living there. So when the Zionists came in 1947, and the delegation of the United Nations came, the chief rabbi of the community was Rabbi Dushinsky. There's a picture of him, and he pleaded with the United Nations. It's the United Nations documents. He said, we furthermore wish to express our definite opposition to a Jewish state in any part of Palestine. And this is our view. We don't want the state. We've been demonstrating. After he passed on, we had another chief rabbi. You can see hundreds of thousands here. You see in this street alone, tens of thousands going out to meet the rabbi. We have demonstrations against the state in Washington, D.C., of the occupation till today. And we recognize, again, we are not allowed to have a Jewish sovereignty. We're not allowed to kill or steal or oppress in order to create the sovereignty. And on top of that, we are grateful for the Muslim and Arab countries throughout this 2,000-year history of us. We went through trials and tribulations. We went through the Crusades, the Inquisition. that they tried to forcibly convert Jews to Christianity, and they murdered, killed, I mean, in the worst manner, the leaders of Christianity, and the others who refused to accept, they ran away, and they were banished from Spain and Portugal. And it's there. If you go to these countries, you can see it. It's etched in the walls and all this. What I'm saying, it's not a secret. And it was the Muslim and Arab countries that embraced the Jews, took them in with a distinctly different religion than Judaism, yet we were able to enjoy their hospitality, and we flourished amongst the Muslims. So even though we have a distinctly different religion, it was never a religious conflict between the two, and that includes in Palestine and Al-Quds in Jerusalem. We lived and flourished as neighbors, as in the same courtyards. We babysat each other's children. We lived in peace. So it's clear that there's not the issue is not a difference of religion. That is not the cause of this hate. What happened was the introduction of this ersatz Judaism called Zionism, which is a little over, like I say, 100 years old. The beginning of the 1910s, 1920s, they started coming up in droves, and the rabbis pleaded with them, we do not want this. The community did not want them, but they were forcibly took their position, took control with the power. After World War I, Britain took the mandate, had the mandate, and they gave, because they were close with Theodor Herzl, with Chaim Weizmann, the first president of Israel, they gave them the power over the land. So and we had to, with pleading, we were able to extract the Jews, that we shouldn't have to be even under their rule, but they were the ones who were taking the power. And our communities demonstrated and were assassinated by the Haganah, Irgun, Lehi, by the Zionists. The Haganah turned into, later became the IDF. And we were demonstrating. Since then, since our rabbis, we spoke out, Jews are arrested. Every boy and girl who turns 17 becomes a criminal in our communities. Hundreds of thousands of Jews that are living in that from the old community and the ones who came after World War II, because there's mandatory military service. Our children we refuse to serve in their army, so they get arrested. We get beaten when we demonstrate against. We constantly stand up and say, because we want the world to know it's not Judaism. The occupation, the existence of the state is not out. They're using our religion. They're using our name to accomplish this criminal act. So we demonstrate, and you can see children get arrested, get beaten. If this would happen in any other country, it would be a scandal. This is daily. We have thousands of pictures, and the state of Israel has in their collection more than us than we have. This is what's happening there daily, because we're demonstrating. They get trampled by horses, ridden over by the cars. You can see, I'm not going to show you that many pictures, but here they get sprayed when they demonstrate with stink water. This is one of the ploys of Zionism, because they're poor and they destroy their clothes to discourage demonstrations. So this is what we have going on in the Holy Land, and the world doesn't even know. Here, this is in the streets of Mea Shearim, the very religious community. It says, "Stop Zionist terrorist massacre in Gaza." This is what you will see. They have painted Palestinian flags if you ever go. This is the old religious community that was prior to Zionism. This is our existence in Palestine. So our narrative is that the Zionists have taken our 3,000-year narrative, and with the power of media, that was a very limited media. That was they didn't have internet, all the ways to show what's happening. It was a few channels, radio, and then television a little, and the Zionists were able to control that, and they sold the Western world a narrative that is repugnant, repulsive, that the Arabs, it's an empty land basically. The Jews are simply people who are the remnants of Europe, and they're trying to reestablish their lives. There's unfortunately so much suffering, and these Arabs hate the Jews, the Muslims hate the Jews, and they're trying to kill them, and they're drawing them from the land for no reason whatsoever. They totally ignored the fact that there was over 400 villages and homes of Palestinians that was totally eradicated. They totally ignore the fact that the majority of people living in Palestine were the Muslim community, and they're ignoring the fact that the Christian and Jewish community were all opposed to this occupation. So that is the way they were able to establish and present themselves as the Judaism and the Jewish voice and the fathers of science and so forth, ignoring the fact that this had nothing to do with Judaism. In fact, even Albert Einstein spoke up against this, making a state against the populace over there, and he wasn't so happy at the beginning. Maybe later he started, they put so much pressure on him that he should join. But he was okay. So how can you make a state against the indigenous population? So this is something that has to be clarified. Science is always claims to that what they're looking is for facts, and anybody who is looking for facts and uses logic and not emotions, is not driven by emotions, will have to admit and recognize that the narrative of Judaism, it's a religion, it's 3,000 years. They will have to admit to the fact that we flourished in every Arab and Muslim country. There may have been bumps in the road here and there, but as a general rule, we lived there. There were no human rights groups to protect us. We flourished. And they have to admit that in the Christian countries, if anything, we fared worse than in the Muslim countries, because there's always bumps in the road from different people with a different religion. But we flourished in those lands. We had our societies, our communities, and they have to admit that we were living up to the Second World War, up to the First World War, under Ottoman Empire, under a Muslim leadership. We lived together, and if you'll ask old Arabs and old Jews, they will all tell you their personal stories of how we lived together and helped each other. So you admit to, so anybody who follows that will ask, what happened that there is this divide, there's this hate, this blood pouring of Palestinians and of Jews? What happened? And they'll have to admit to the fact that this is simply because something changed in this last 100 years. And what changed? One thing changed solely, one thing alone, and that is the introduction of this power called Zionism, this ideology of Zionism that was that developed into the state of Israel. And since this came into the community, this fabric of the Holy Land, there is endless river of tragic death and blood, and they constantly, Zionism, with their power of the mic that they had the sole control of, insists it's because a hate of Muslims, that they don't like the Jews. And that is where the problem is. Science should refute that vociferously and say this is unacceptable. Scientists around the world should be up in arms because they're scientists and they're looking at facts. They should be, and we demand, even though Jews have to be loyal and humble citizens in every land, but the bloodshed is what we're seeing. Even this last Saturday, that happened, the horrific death of 1,300 people, and now over 3,000 Palestinians just this last few days that are being mauled and bombed, and over 10,000 wounded, all directly because of the development and the control of the state of Israel with its occupation. And they try to confuse scientists and the world by saying it's Hamas. A few years ago, it was this group, it was the PLO, anything an excuse. They're putting Band-Aids on a hemorrhaging wound, and they try to bang and flatten it out, and you don't see blood for a few days because you put on a very thick bandage, and everybody says they're happy, and they say, oh, it was just some bad people, evil people. They will not use logic and say this is, we're not, again, condoning violence, but they will not use the simple logic of saying that you have a whole millions of people that are being oppressed, that their dignity was taken away, their homes, their life, and every action brings a reaction. This is what's going to be the result. And it is critical. It's the danger is that it's going to happen again, and it's happening. So we have to stand and tell the world, stop the occupation, remove the cause of this terrible Nakba, this tragedy. That is what our message is for scientists.
Rabbi, you've covered quite a bit of ground there. Let me ask you, like I said at the beginning, one of the challenges is when talking about religion is interpretation and language. and how we interpret, for example, the Bible, and how we talk about each other and the world in general. You also talked about the vision of a type of paradise where according to the Jewish religion, God will intervene and create a sort of metaphysical paradise on the planet. This seems to be the same vision that the Muslims have, and the same vision that the Christians have. Yet there are obviously mutually contradictory principles and ideas in each of these religions. So, what is the overall vision? It seems like, to an outsider, I imagine, looking at this objectively, it would seem like uh, like we're gambling, or like religious people are gambling, because it's one one view is the Jewish vision, another view is the Muslim vision, another is the Christian vision. They're all conflicting. So what is the ultimate outcome of this, and what's the solution? Is it just a matter of opinion? Is it a matter of faith, and that's the only thing that will ultimately decide, or can we resort to science and scientific principles, management principles, political principles? For example, voting theory. We do quite a bit of work on voting theory, where it's an actual science, and we're contributing in new ways to that science. But from a religious perspective, we all talk about paradise, but it's not very clear exactly how we get to that paradise. Can you comment on this?
Yes, with the help of the Almighty. Maimonides, by the way, who was in Egypt, so just to show a scholar and one of our leading codifiers of law and so forth, that we live and breathe the works of Maimonides. And he was, by the way, a doctor and so forth, and he wrote on science and so forth. He's had just beautiful. He has so many subjects that he wrote on, and he was proficient in. But basically, from the Torah, he took that all from the Torah. Yes, you call it faith, and that's exactly what it is. It's faith, because you can't see God, you can't touch God, but we do know we know, first of all, the world is less than 6,000 years according to Jewish belief, and we know how there's no gap in our history, going back all the way till Adam and Eve, Adam and Chava, we say. So we have without a gap how the grandchildren, and they all spoke about how they saw Adam, and then his grandchild saw Noah. Noah, who built the Teva, we call the ark, and then his children till Abraham, and Abraham. So we never have a gap in history. And say exactly how the world went, and they all they said it was one God. Adam was the first person, and he was created by God, and there was nothing else, no other human being on the world. So we have a belief in us how it was, but it's belief. At the end of the day, it's a belief. Even though our narrative was not like somebody came along and said when there was the Torah that. God spoke to me. We have over 600,000 males from 20 to 60. Besides so it was over 1 million people standing by Mount Sinai when Moses took the Torah from God, went up, and God spoke. Everyone heard God speaking to them. So we don't have a gap in history, and it was not by one person. Nobody disagreed that they heard God speaking when the Torah was given to them. So it's over 1 million people, and we're people of the book. Somebody should have refuted that. So it was passed down from generation to generation till today. So we have the belief, the pure belief, but it's, again, you can't see God, but it's a belief. It's but we have the history exacting from the day of its creation till today, and we know exactly what happened. That said, Maimonides writes about like the prophecies of the future, what will happen, the metaphysical change, and so forth. He says we are not to delve into these issues. It's not our issue when it will happen. Many of the prophecies are written in metaphorical terms. As parables, so you don't understand them till it happens, or some great holy man understands it even before. So we do not know exactly how the end of time will be. We do believe that there will become a Messiah from David, from his offsprings, and there will be a spirit of repentance. There won't be any more atheists. Everybody will believe in God. And as I said, God will build a temple. And it says all the nations will gather together and serve him in harmony. Yes, the Muslims have a totally distinctly different belief. The Christians have a different belief at the end of time. We have our belief distinctly who the Messiah will be and how it will be, but we can't.
Rabbi, I'm sorry to interrupt, but the Christians and the Muslims have there's some differences, obviously, in terms of the exact ideas, but the overall vision is exactly the same, I would say. So
that's what I'm saying.
How does one differentiate between these visions, and how do we actually get there?
Okay, so like I'm saying, the end of time, there will be this change. In other words, today it may look like impossible. There's so many atheists, so much corruption, so much wrong. Why will everybody have a spirit? There will be a change in the world. But we believe that there will be a change in the world. And like you say, maybe the Muslims and Christians have many similarities, but obviously they don't believe in this, that it will be King David or from his offspring that will be the Messiah. They don't believe that exactly our concept, our belief. But one thing is certain, that there is a concept of a change in the world now. But we are, as I said, Maimonides clearly tells us that we should not be harping or delving and being busy with the end of time. Because when it will happen, God will happen, and God will make it happen, and everybody will recognize it. So I told, like Muslim people, we live together. We were total friendship. We were able to live in this helping each other and so forth. Even though they know and we knew we have a distinctly different religion, and it's unacceptable for a Muslim if a Muslim would not follow his religion. So, and yet we were able to live as distinctly practicing Jews, and it's in their religion. Just bear with me a second. So they have this difference. And so we always tell people, it doesn't matter. We can live together, because when that happening at the end of time will happen, it will happen. And we'll see. We say it's going to happen like this. They say what they say. So it's not a problem. It's not a point of contention. When the end of time will come, we are certain it will happen our way. But till that day goes, we have to practice. We believe we simply have to practice the laws of this Torah. Be kind. Just as God is compassionate, you should be compassionate. Following the laws of the Torah, eating kosher, doing good, following all the laws of the Torah, and not occupying, not stealing, not killing. So that is the system of our life, to uphold the words of the Torah, and it has nothing. It doesn't affect when the end of time will be, how it will be. It's our yearning and prayer for it to happen soon in our days. We pray to God every day because we want our life should be a point where to glorify God in our existence by doing good, and the pinnacle of that will be when God will reveal His glory throughout the world. So we pray and yearn for this, and pray for the return to the Holy Land to serve God. But it's nothing that really is an impediment in our life system, in our life days, or coexisting with other people. I don't know if you do feel I answered your question, or I think you're not happy. You don't feel I answered. So maybe I'm missing a point of what you're asking.
No, that's fine, Rabbi. You've been very generous. Your staff has also been very clear about the limitations on your time today. We'd love to have you back to talk more. There's obviously much more to say. You did answer the question partly, but I can't help but feel some sense of I'm not sure, frustration, perplexity at the idea that many religions say the same thing. So it feels kind of like Las Vegas in some sense, with all due respect, because all religions say the same thing, and then we don't make any advancement, and then we have the situation now in the Middle East and in other places around the world, and the planet is full of nuclear weapons, and we're not sure how exactly to proceed with these differences. In any case, Rabbi, like I said, you've been extremely generous. Thank you very, very much. I will leave links to your material in the video description for our listeners. And you are always welcome back to talk. And I hope we can talk again at some point.
Certainly, with God's help. Contact us. We'll keep on. Thank you. Bye-bye.